So with that, we'll get started. Appreciate you guys all getting your handouts to us early. We would ask you to turn your cell phones off and always address the chair and let us know who you are and what your position is on the bill. Everybody here looks like an old pro, but in case we have any new members attending via Zoom. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 74, slow-moving vehicles, and we will have the good Senator Ide go ahead and present that bill for us.
Thank you, Chairman Steinmetz. So this is my first time doing this, so bear with me. We're doing Senate File 74, and I'll give you just a brief summary here of what this bill is about, for those of you that haven't seen it or don't have it in front of you. This bill requires that a farm tractor unit of equipment or farm implement that is designed to operate at speeds in excess of 25 miles per hour must display slow-moving vehicle emblem and a speed identification symbol. Any combination of a farm tractor unit of equipment or farm implement that can operate at speeds in excess of 25 miles per hour is limited to travel at the lowest speed indicated by a speed identification symbol on any portion of the combination. So that gets pretty wordy there, but essentially, just to summarize, right now, our law has, slow-moving vehicle is, the maximum you can go with a slow-moving vehicle is 25 miles an hour. And so the way I understand this bill, and I may get corrected here, is the new SIS is what they refer to it as. And you would have to have another sign next to the slow-moving vehicle sign showing that you can go over 25 miles an hour and up to a certain speed. So thank you, Chairman Steinmetz.
Thank you, Senator Ide. With that, we'll proceed. And do we have anyone from the agency here that would like to testify from WYDOT if you have any comments on the bill or? Okay, or you guys are our highway patrolmen. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Madam Chairman, Committee, Josh Walther, Lieutenant Colonel for the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Before I turn this over to one of our resident experts in commercial carrier, I just want to say, anything really safety related, we can do our best to try to wrap our heads around it and support a good bill. We did notice just a couple things we wanted to point out and maybe would help us move the bill forward, just some issues with a couple definitions maybe. But all in all, we support the bill and don't have any major concerns with it. But with that, I'll turn it over to our commercial carrier captain, Dan Wyrick.
Thank you.
There we go. Madam Chairman, thank you. Dan Wyrick with the Wyoming Highway Patrol, commercial carrier. One of the things that I noticed the most in this was the use of the verbiage special mobile equipment. There's no statutory definition for this, and have a little bit of concern about that and how that has a general meaning towards construction equipment versus the farm implement of husbandry and farm equipment. And the bill is very much straightforward. Senator Ide was correct in his interpretation, how it just allows farm tractors and implements to exceed the speed limit up to the indication speed on the SIS sticker.
Okay, committee, are there any questions for Mr. Wyrick? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Being in law enforcement, do you see, are you given violations very much on, just pure SMV signs and people going over that 25 mile an hour limit? Or do you have much experience with that, or have you seen that, or do you issue very many citations? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Senator Wright, in my time on the patrol, which is a little over 18 years, and as a road trooper from 2004 to 2015, educational opportunities, yes. Ever issued a citation for it? No, I haven't. Have I heard of anything like that? No. In the enforcement of size and weight in commercial vehicles, if a tractor is loaded on the back of a flatbed truck or trailer and that sign is facing the rear, I've stopped them before, yes, and had make them cover it up because the slow moving triangle says you can't exceed 25 miles an hour. So we just do it for safety purposes only. I've never issued a citation for it.
Thank you.
Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Either officer, I'm a farmer, and the equipment that you're pulling behind that tractor is just getting wider and wider and wider in there. You know, we got the fold-up wings anymore, and you're taking up the emergency lane, I guess, or shoulder, and one full lane. You know, you're trying not to clip all the reflectors off, you know, and going down the highway. Are you seeing any increase in accidents? Because there's so many drivers that are inattentive, you know, they're texting or whatever, and all of a sudden, oh, good Lord, you know, they're on that tractor pulling that implement down the highway. Have you experienced any of that stuff, or are the
When it comes to, Madam Chairman, Senator French.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You're fine.
As far as that, I'm not aware. I mean, I don't know personal knowledge of every crash that takes place. We have rules in place for the extra wide, even farm equipment. The rules and regs apply to, you know, anything over 16 that can't stay to the right of center line. So, but personal knowledge, I have none with with those wider farm equipment and implements of husbandry. I mean, the last one that I don't know if it had to do with size more than operation. And that was on I-25 at one time, but that's been several years ago.
All right, committee, are there, Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I think that you brought up the special mobile equipment statement on here, and if I recall correctly in committee meetings, that was a European type of designation for foreign equipment that they're importing now, and it's causing, you know, they're not labeled the same as our equipment. I believe it was the manufacturers or the distributors for said equipment that brought that up as something they wanted to add to it. That's where I think it came from, but are you aware of anybody that uses that, either imported? I don't know if you know those things, but I think that's where that came from. And it was trying to get in there on the request of the manufacturers. That's what I can recall in a committee meeting long time ago. And it's probably not easier for me to recall, but I guess, could you expound on that if you know anything, Captain? I guess it's Captain.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Madam Chairman, Senator Kolb. I did do some research on the definition of special mobile equipment. It's a general term and definition. Colorado has one that defines this. Nevada has one. It pretty much refers more to the construction equipment, so like motor graders, drilling equipment, front end loaders, more construction related, and maybe even oil field drilling rigs and that type of equipment. Anything that as far as the importation of these tractors from European countries or out of Canada or anywhere, I'm not aware of that. Senator.
Well, thank you for that, and I believe we might have an amendment that takes care of some of those concerns. But we want to thank you both for being here, and thank you for your service to the citizens of our state. Thank you. All right, who would like to testify on this bill next? Come on up.
Madam Chairman, Keith Kennedy for the Wyoming Wheat Growers Association, as well as the Wyoming Ag Business Association. This was an idea that we had brought forward as an interim topic. So this was an interim bill. And we do support the bill. The standard that was created just before 2008 by the American Society of Agricultural and Biological Engineers, and you'll note that small change, it actually changed in about 2005 to include the word biological. And that's the reason that we made that one change in there. We support this because there is a fair number of equipment out on the road operating today that has a speed information symbol on it. Particularly self-propelled sprayers are probably the best example of it, but it's common on, and this standard was actually adopted by ANSI, and this is pretty consistent across all countries. And when you think about equipment manufacturers, let's just say green and red so we don't use proper names, they manufacture equipment here for use in other countries, as well as manufacture equipment in those countries for use here. And so they want to try and have something that's somewhat consistent. Equipment that's delivered here in the US is all signed in miles per hour, as opposed to a topic that we discussed at length in interim about whether or not we should include any other type of linear measurement that might be used elsewhere in the world. But I would call your attention to the amendment that we have proposed. And we believe, along with, we've conferred with several of the other groups, and on page 2, line 13, delete "and special mobile equipment." And then on page 2, line 14, delete "manufactured and." And then for the final amendment, portion of the amendment, page 3, line 8, delete "or units towed by," and then on line 9, delete "special mobile equipment." This does two things: alleviate that concern that this might involve construction equipment. Earlier in the complete title here, special mobile equipment is mentioned, and then in section F that precedes, is not listed here in the bill, there is an exemption for construction equipment for this special mobile equipment. And so that is the reason that following that, we would ask to delete the special mobile equipment language. And deleting the language about "manufactured and," this equipment has actually been manufactured since 2008 or 9. And so it's perfectly reasonable to set a date when the bill becomes valid, but with the equipment already having been manufactured, we believe that language should appropriately be removed. And with that, I'd certainly welcome the committee's questions.
Questions for Mr. Kennedy? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. Kennedy. So first name Keith? Thank you,
It
Keith.
is.
I've got a few questions with this bill. First off, on new farm equipment, that you would have to purchase, or tractors, are the manufacturers and the dealers mandated to put that signage on that equipment? That's my first question. I guess, can I ask one more and then you can maybe answer both of them? My other concern is the existing equipment that doesn't have it on there. You know, I looked online to see if you could even buy a sign to put on there to comply with it. And then you don't know, a lot of the, self-propelled stuff, you don't know what the maximum is on the speed limit or the speed of that piece of equipment. So with those two questions, I've just have some trouble with this bill. Just it's more regulation. It's a lot of confusion to farmers. And thank you for that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. To the second question first, this is installed when the equipment is built, before it's even delivered or shipped. And that is done based on, for example, the quality of the tires that are used, the quality of the bearings that are used on, whether that's a powered equipment or towed equipment. And so if I were to want one of these symbols, it would have to come from the manufacturer. It's actually listed as a part number for vehicles that are rated. And so if I went into the parts store and they asked me for my model and serial number, they would tell me whether or not I could even get the symbol. And to be fair to them, manufacturers do not want to risk that someone would operate or tamper with equipment and make it so that it was unsafe. So they definitely have an interest. And Madam Chairman, I noted it down in my head, but I didn't bring a pen up with me. Could you repeat the first question? I had the answer already, but I can't remember it.
Go ahead, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first question was, is there any laws, or is there any mandates that these manufacturers have to put these on there in our country in particular? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chairman, Senator Ide, there isn't any requirement that they put this on. In many cases, they use this as a marketing tool. This is another means for when I'm roading a piece of equipment, farm equipment, I'm not working. And the less time I spend on the road, the more I'm using that equipment for what I'm supposed to. And to expand a little bit more on the more regulation question, I look at this as less regulation or allowing people to do what the equipment is designed to do. As the statute reads now, I'm not supposed to be allowed to travel more than 25 miles an hour with any equipment that displays an SMV symbol, whether or not this speed information symbol is there that says it's rated to travel faster. And I will comment on back in a former life, I was actually a contractor for YDOT, sprayed roadsides. And I would display an SMV sign when I was operating most of the time, but I had to be able to remove it and hide it whenever I was roading somewhere, or part of my operation, I actually operated it at 30 miles an hour. And I actually had a state patrolman pull me over and make that educational effort that we mentioned earlier, that I should take that off. He noticed that after he was running in front of me to catch some of the folks that might be going a touch faster than me as well. Thank you.
Any other questions, committee? Senator French.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just more of a comment, maybe related to Senator Ide's comments. These modern tractors are all, I don't own one, they're $400,000. I don't have that. But they have all these spells. We just hit the hazard in the tractor and excuse me, geez. Sorry about that, folks. I talk with my hands sometimes. they have these little wing things out, on the fenders, and they're blinking, and the top of the cab, they're blinking. And most farmers that are going down the highway, especially like my area between Powell and Cody, you take a tractor out on that highway with an implement, you just say a couple prayers and hope for the best that you make it to your destination. So it's a safety thing, and most of those farmers put that on to warn that traffic, And I know one implement that I have that's got the fold-up wings and folded out, it's, I think, 30-foot wide. And well, it's got an electrical cord that I can plug into the tractor that has all these flashing lights on the implement too. And so as a farmer going down some of these really busy roads, and 75% of the people that are coming up behind you are, texting, you want to warn them. So everybody's trying their best to warn them because they don't want to be in a bad accident. So it's just more of a comment.
Thank you, Senator French. And I think the appropriate response is, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome. Any further? Senator Kolb, we're talkative tonight.
I'm just over here on the side. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Would it be your opinion that this improves the productivity for farmers? Anybody hauling implements down the road, that they could, if the machine is capable of and and constructed properly, exceed the 25 miles an hour they're currently limited to? So it would be a benefit. I mean, do you see it to be a benefit for folks driving over 25 when they can safely?
Madam Chairman, that's certainly correct. And I'd add something to that, especially with our ag business members. This is generally not they don't make long road trips with these. If you've priced any of these implement tires recently, our ag business members, what most of them have told me is if it's further than 5 miles, they will probably load that equipment onto their trailer and move it that way rather than to road it. It's a trade-off between expense and productivity. How soon can I get this out and doing the job that it's supposed to do?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to testify on this bill?
Madam Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, not much to add other than that my organization does support this bill and the amendments that Mr. Kennedy brought forward. He has shared with us, and I think they're appropriate. I think this is a matter of safety for both sides, the agricultural and the general public. And with that, Chairman Steinmetz, I would sit for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moline. Any questions for Mr. Moline? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have, I don't know, I'm not getting comfortable with this bill. I understand the safety, I'm all about that, but you have to balance the safety and the regulation that a lot of farmers and ag people might not appreciate. And these speed identification signs, there's no standard on how big they'd have to be. I think an SUV sign pretty much tells them soon enough that something's going slow, and you'd have to get up real close to them to, show the way I read this is, it'd have to show the maximum speed that vehicle will be allowed to go if you have those SIS signs. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chairman Steinmetz, Senator Ide, I look at that at a different way. We've had these slow-moving vehicle signs for decades. They're very recognizable. If you see this sign, if you've been out on the road, you should know what it is, especially in Wyoming. But what this does, we've always had the regulation for a long time that if you're going below 25 mile an hour, the regulations are thou shall have an SMV sign on, but you are limited to 25 miles an hour. Now, with the change in technology, with some of these implements, as Mr. Kennedy pointed out, they're capable of going much faster, but for public safety, you have the SMV sign on them, you are limited to 25 miles an hour. What this regulation, this change, potential change does, you're limited to 25 miles an hour unless your vehicle is rated at being able to do a higher speed, and then you can still have the SMV sign that's showing that you are going slower than the general rate. But it keeps that visible, keeps that visibility with the other safety flashing lights. So this, yes, this is a regulation, but it's an improvement on the regulation that we have now because it will allow us to use our modern technology of a vehicle that can do 40 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, where before we wanted to keep that displayed for a warning for the public, but we were limited to 25. Now, if we can do 30, 35, 40, we're on the road that much less time. And it takes the time off that you're on the highway. It reduces that, helps reduce the impediment that you are to traffic. And I think it improves safety for both sides. So I think this is always the regulation we've had. This is an improvement of that regulation.
Follow up, Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just real quick. Would it be more simple potentially just to raise the maximum speed on the SMV signs so they don't have to put signs all over their equipment? Is that an alternative? Thank you.
Chairman Steinmetz, Senator Ide, that is an alternative, but we also have to go by federal motor carrier, the federal rules. And I believe this coincides with what a lot of the federal rules are. So to be consistent with what we're doing in Wyoming, we need to be consistent with the federal rules and regulations. And so when you go from Wyoming to Nebraska, you're consistent on the rules. And that's what this does, is it kind of gets Wyoming up to date with what the federal rules and regs are and allows us to do that. I think that in a nutshell, this is the simplest and best thing we can do for public safety.
Senator Gold.
Well, I thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Moline, would it be your opinion that it is safer to travel faster down a road than slower down a road? Say, I'll just give you two greatly different examples. 5 miles an hour, you got the situation where someone's texting and they're coming up behind somebody, and you have a situation where you're traveling 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. What do you think, it's safer to travel faster or slower down that road with your implement if it was possible and legal?
Madam Chair, I'm going to use this. I'm going to have to stop and think a little bit, and that's kind of hard on an old redneck like me. But the way I look at that, sir, and I hope I answer your question, by being able to travel at a faster speed, as long as that vehicle is rated for that and can do that 35, 40 miles an hour, it's safe to operate it at that. The less time that you are on an area that has heavier traffic by traveling, instead of 5, if you're doing 30, you're on that road less. People are coming up on you less quickly. I don't know if that's proper English or not, but I think I got the idea across. So yes, it's safer to travel faster and get off the road. People are coming up on you that much less fast. It just doesn't seem like good English, but yeah. I hope I answered your question, sir, in a very awkward way, I have to admit.
Thank you, Mr. Moline. And I do think you hit the part of Senator Ide's question too, if a vehicle is safe to operate at that speed. And so that might be the issue with using the slow moving vehicle sign, just increasing the rate of speed on that sign, because some of these vehicles are not designed to go that fast. So then it would raise a safety concern. And I'm, from the testimony I've heard so far, that is why they've created this new rating system for the vehicles that are safe to operate at that speed. So wouldn't you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oh, one more question.
Not a question. I'll try not to talk with my hand. You know, these older tractors that I've got, they're not capable of going very fast. You know, you hit eighth gear and you're lucky if you're at 18, 20 miles an hour. So I have the diamond on the back of them, you know, to warn people. But the modern tractors, they're quite advanced. Those machines are capable of doing 35, 40 miles an hour or whatever safely. They're quite a well-designed thing. These modern disc bind swathers, man, you know, you don't pay $150,000 for a piece of junk. They're very modern, safe, and they've got all the bells and whistles in them. You hit the hazard and they're flashing, trying to warn everybody, you know, that, hey, I'm not going as fast as you in your car, but I'm moving right along, you know.
But Chairman Steinmetz, I would say one thing, you know, people ask me as a lobbyist, do we need to meet every year at the legislature? And I say yes, and I think this is a case in point. We need to change our rules and regulations, in this case it is a statute, to adapt to what modern technology has done. So yes. Yeah, the tractors I grew up driving, the old Ford 8M, there wasn't any way it was going to do more than.
Thank you, Mr.
But anyway,
Moline,
with that,
we
I would-
appreciate it. Thank you. Anyone else to testify on this bill tonight? Is there anyone online that wants to testify on this bill? All right, seeing none, we will close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved by Kolb,
Second.
seconded by French. And we will work the bill and then have discussion. Are there any amendments on page 1? Any amendments on page 2?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Senator Kolb.
Page 2, line 13, delete and special mobile equipment.
Senator Kolb, let me stop you there. I think there was a small problem with that amendment. It's only and special mobile on line 13. Equipment is actually on line 14. Yep, did you catch that, Linda? Yes, well, it would be and special mobile is on line 13. Equipment manufactured and is on line 14. And you can go ahead and say that. I just wanted to catch that before we missed
Thank
it.
you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. That's why you're the chairman. Okay, we'll repeat line 2, page 2, line 14. Delete manufactured and. That's it.
Delete
That's-
equipment manufactured and.
just look at it.
Okay, look at your bill.
I'm just reading it off here.
Yes, and that is incorrect.
Oh, well, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome. We want to get it just right.
Well, let me
So-
have someone else. do
So
this.
I will repeat the motion on line 13 of page 2. And special mobile would be deleted on line 13. Equipment manufactured on would be deleted on line 14. And that is exactly right. The amendment just had one word out of place, so, but we need to get it just right. Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. And that motion has been moved by Kolb, seconded by French. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. The motion to amend has passed, has been adopted. Is there any amendments on page 3? Amendments on page 3? Would you like to amend page 3, Senator Cole?
If I dare, I will attempt to do it, Madam Chairman. Move an amendment on page 3, line 8, delete, or units towed by. Line 9, delete special mobile equipment.
That is exactly right. Good job.
I'm quiet from now on out.
Is there a second on that amendment?
Second.
Moved by Cole, seconded by French, and it is exactly right. With that, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. And then we'll go on to page 4. Are there any amendments on page 4? Seeing none, we'll go to discussion, committee discussion on this bill. Would anyone like to discuss it? Senator I.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You can probably tell I was, throughout the conversation, not too excited. Some of the questions I still have is, this agriculture and biological engineers setting the standards. I really don't know much about them and what their motivations are for setting those standards. I mean, I'm all about safety and the best for the farmers. I think we're just getting too complicated all the time. We're just signs here, this, there. Next one was going to be for 40 miles per hour to 60 miles per hour, and then you need another sign for that. So I'm speaking against this bill. I think that just the SMV signs probably are doing the job the way the discussion from our folks from the sheriff's department and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Senator Cole.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I was trying to stop the feedback. Just like to say I do support this bill, and I support the bill because it's modernization. There's new equipment out there that is safe. In order to comply with the standards that we all have to live with under the federal government, to make sure we have a uniform way of displaying to the Highway Patrol folks what is going on. This actually enables our ag folk or whoever's pulling this equipment to travel at a faster rate of speed, which I can assure you, your rate of contact with the vehicle that's behind you will be slower because you're traveling faster. So it's a safety issue. It is safer to travel faster on a road, not slower on a road. And it's also a benefit to our ag people, whoever's towing this equipment. That was testimony during the interims committee meetings. It seemed to be a benefit. So this was purely to help people. It was purely to comply with a new set of standards that we can help our ag people be more efficient and also, I think, safer. I know safer. I don't think I know. It's safer to do it this way. And so this is merely to help people. It wasn't to put onerous regulations on people to make them comply with some crazy new federal rule, because I don't believe that either. But I think this is a thing that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it was worked on by the interim committee, and a lot of people had a chance to look at this. And I mean, I don't always agree with what had happened during the interim, but in this particular subject, it was well vetted. We had a lot of people come up and testify. So it's a positive thing for the people. It's a positive thing for safety. And I just don't see it being an issue with, too much regulations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Cole Benide. Senator French, do you have comments?
On what, Madam Chair?
I just thought you might.
Yeah. I respect where Senator Ide's coming from. I truly do. But I think this, like Senator Culp said, it's a safety issue, and I support it.
Thank you. And I will try to kill this horse the rest of the way by saying that for me, it's as simple as displaying a speed limit sign in another manner. And we have speed limit signs all across the state. And so That's the way I see it, and I've learned that when the trade organizations come and their members support something, that I listen to them because they're very in tune with their members. And so I truly respect your thoughts, Senator Ide, but I will also be voting yes on this bill. So with that, Linda, we will have you call the roll.
Aye.
Excused?
Senator Ide,
No.
Senator Cole,
Aye.
Chairman Steinmeier.
Aye.
So there are 3 ayes and 1 no.
Yes, and let's hold the vote open for Senator Hicks and let him vote on that one as well.
Do you have a, Madam Chairman, do you have a procedure to present this to the floor?
Yes, that will be Senator Ide. It is his bill. Thank you for the reminder. All right, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 30, Apiculture, Agricultural Land and Use Purpose, and Senator Cole will present that bill for us. Thank you all for coming.
Why, thank you, Madam Chairman. We have a bill in front of us that is talking about the clarification of the act of keeping bees in agricultural purposes for tax purposes, kind of a play on words, and making conforming amendments providing it for an effective date. This bill was discussed in the interim topic over the summer, rather late in the year, I might add. This basically expands the use for how do you pronounce? Apiculture. I'll be an expert, I guess, at this before I'm done. And it puts that in the same category as agriculture for said purpose. And let's see. It's the fiscal note on this bill is indeterminable at this time. It was thought that the pollinators that we're trying to help out across the state, across the U.S. really, but would benefit from us trying to improve the ability for this to expand. As you can see, I didn't know I was going to do this, so throughout the state. So because the pollinators are under attack right now, and the thought was if we expand it and let this become a more broader use, that we can in fact help our farmers in the production of whatever they're raising that needs to be pollinated. So it was a general expansion for that purpose. And hold on one second, Madam Chair. This bill clarifies that apiculture is an agricultural purpose for taxes. The extent of beekeeping agricultural land is limited by land size, location, and capacity to produce under the definition in this bill and Wyoming Statute 1913 103B, Romanet 10A, and B, Romanet 9. That's a brief summary of the bill, and I'll stand for questions from the committee.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Are there any questions for Senator Kolb? Or shall we go right to public testimony? All right. We will first go to the Department of Revenue. Thank you, Director Henderson, for being here and providing information on this important subject.
Good evening. Excuse me. Chairman Steinmetz, members of the committee, Brenda Henson, Director of the Department of Revenue. With me tonight, I have Brian Judkins, who is the Property Tax Division Administrator. And the bill before you, Senate File 30, you always hope that those bills will be fairly easy. I believe there are 3 words that are added to the definition. Keep in mind, this is the definition section in Chapter 13 of Title 39, and it simply changes the definition or adds to the definition of agricultural purpose. However, I believe it's important that we look at the overall requirements of agricultural classification within our statutes and how it guides those property owners and those that administer the law in how they should consider that definition. So I want to begin by talking about the Constitution. Article 15, Section 11B states that all taxable property shall be valued at its full value as defined by the legislature, except agricultural and grazing lands, which shall be valued based on its ability to produce an agricultural product under normal conditions. Based on that, then Title 39 further requires the Department of Revenue to determine that taxable value. And it further states under 3913-103X(a) that in determining the taxable value, that the value of the agricultural land must be based on the current use of the land and the capability of the land to produce, including grazing and forage, based on average yields of lands of the same classification under normal conditions. So here's the valuation process that I've covered. But now the Constitution requires the legislature to determine what then qualifies as agricultural land to be valued in such manner. The legislature has determined that there are 4 criteria that assessors must consider when looking to see if land qualifies. The first, the land is presently being used and employed for an agricultural purpose. This bill changes that list that is defined as agricultural purpose and adds apiculture. Number 2, the land is not part of a platted subdivision, except for a parcel in excess of 35 acres that meets all the other criteria. Number 3 is that if the owner is the one that is operating the land, they must have an income of $500 per year. If the land is leased to another agricultural operator, that operator must have an income of $1,000 per year in order to qualify. The 4th criteria is the land has been used, employed, consistent with the land's size, location, and capability to produce. There is a further designation within that criteria that gives some outs, that basically says the land, it wasn't used to its capability to produce, and for these 4 reasons, it could still qualify even though it wasn't used to its capability to produce. The first of those is experience as an intervening cause of production failure beyond its control. 2, causes a marketing delay for economic advantage. 3, participates in a bona fide conservation program. That's basically your crop reserve program where the federal government compensates ag producers for not planting a crop. And 4, has planted a crop that will not yield an income in the tax year. So what I ask this committee to do is consider the challenge before those that administer the law. How do you apply the rest of the agricultural administration to apiculture? Other states have included apiculture as a use that qualifies for agricultural classification. However, the valuation method in those states differs from that in Wyoming. In Wyoming, we have a constitution that basically says we have to look at the soils. We have to look at the resource area, which is the growing season, to determine what is the value of that land. In other states that have included apiculture as an agricultural use that qualifies for agricultural classification, those states value the land itself differently. So for example, in Texas and in Nebraska, yes, it can be valued as agricultural. However, all of the land in those states is valued at its full value, and then an exemption is applied if it meets the criteria for agricultural classification. That is a totally different approach than what this bill attempts to do. So as an administrator, if I am the county assessor and I have someone who meets the other three criteria for agricultural classification, how do I measure if that land has been used to its capability to produce an agricultural product? I have a mechanism for rangeland, for dry crop, and for irrigated ground. Those are the only three classifications that we have in Wyoming to be valued as agricultural. So if the legislature deems it appropriate for apiculture to be added, then we need further guidance on how would you like us to classify the use of that land as rangeland, dry crop, or irrigated, because we've got to determine that, and then we've got to determine the classification based on the soil type and the resource area. Should this body deem it appropriate to value agricultural support uses, meaning other than farming and grazing, then I believe it's important that we need to start looking at our valuation methodology for agricultural. When this subject came up in the interim several years ago, the beekeepers testified that typically they don't own the land. They're for hire. They are providing a service to those property owners that already are being valued as agricultural land. They are farmers, and so that land is being valued as such. At that point, I had suggested that if it is the apiculture that we are hoping to support that industry, perhaps another method would be exemptions. Exemptions on sales and use tax, exemptions on other business needs that company has. So with that, we will administer whatever the legislature deems appropriate. It's just that while it seems logical in this bill, the valuation piece is a much larger question, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? Questions? Senator Ide?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was a good report you just gave there. Thank you for that. It gets complicated. I like what you mentioned right there at the end of maybe, exemptions in sales and use. It does get complicated. I sympathize with the small, ag folks. They might have two steers and some chickens and some bees, but the minimum, they can have is 35 acres too, as far as even getting an ag designation on their property. Is that correct?
Madam Chairman, Senator Ide, so as long as it's not in a platted subdivision, the smaller acreages can qualify as long as they meet all four criteria. And the 35 acre number that's noted in statute, several years ago, we had some changes to our subdivision laws that allowed parcels that were greater than 35 acres to be platted. And the intent was to ensure that those large acreages could continue to be valued as agricultural should they decide to be subdivided. But just for clarity, I could own 5 acres of ground that is not in a platted subdivision. As long as I meet the four criteria, I could be valued as agricultural land in Wyoming.
Senator Kolb, did you have a question? Your mic's on.
Why, certainly, Madam Chairman. Do you have any information on the evaluation of the beekeeping business that maybe you found online or other data that you could share with us to talk about what I don't know what proponents are saying about it, and, you know, I've heard what you had to say, but do you have any other information you could share?
Madam Chairman, Senator Kolb, no, I mean, there is a website that is an excellent website. Beekeeping,
We can definitely, Madam Chair, we can definitely provide that to you, but I don't have that right now.
there's a wonderful website that is propped up by the industry, and it actually has links to all the various states. I believe it links 21 different states that have the apiculture as a use that you can qualify for agricultural classification. But what it doesn't go into is how is it valued after that? After it's deemed agricultural for property tax purposes, how is that valuation methodology applied? And our Constitution is very, very clear in requiring assessors to value land based on its capability to produce. And that's much different than other states.
Any further questions? Senator Ide.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, this originated in the Ag Joint Committee. Two guys are on here now. I'm just curious. I haven't heard who brought this and why we have this bill. There wasn't really anybody here to testify in favor of it. Thank you.
Senator Ide, I think I'll answer that. We do have several people on Zoom that are going to testify, and we might find the answer there. Thank you, Director, for helping us with this important issue. So many times this small, simple bill has far-reaching impacts, and we appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there any other people in the room who would like to testify on this bill? Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Dixie Huxtable, Converse County Assessor, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Wyoming County Assessors Association. It's a joy to be here in front of the Ag Committee for the Senate. I don't have to do a lot of my speech because Director Hinson took care of most of that. The assessors did vote to not support this bill in our recent meeting because we don't feel like we can administer it without some definite guidance on the valuation side, as Director Hinson spoke about. I don't know how to value the land that the beehive is sitting on because there's not enough direction for us to do that. There was some mention about some stuff online, and absolutely correct. They are promoting that we can lower your taxes by introducing you to the beekeeping world. But there is no definition or explanation as to how those taxes are valued in those states. There's some parameters to get qualified in some of the states. I don't have the list of all of them, but acreage size, intensity, how many colonies per acre, how long does it have to have been there? Those are all parts of some of the qualifications in some of those states. But again, it doesn't talk about how they value the land once you determine that it is an agricultural piece of land. And in Wyoming, as Director Hinson said, we are valuing the land based on its ability to produce. And I just don't know how to do that with a beehive sitting on an acre of land. With that, I would stand for any questions.
Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. All right, any other public testimony in the room here at the Capitol? One more. All right.
Madam Chairwoman, my name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. The WACD supports this bill on the basis of conservation considerations. Pollinators are an invaluable aspect to the successful proliferation of agricultural plants and cover crops, which contribute to the improvement of soil health and water quality. With that being said, the considerations brought by previous expert commentary this evening do bring up some questions related to mill levy revenue changes and assessment process, which are fair points. So at this time, we would hope that those considerations can be addressed before solidifying this change to statute.
Kelly, thanks for being here today and testifying. I do have a couple of questions since you're supporting the bill and the conservation districts. Did you do any work with helping to craft the bill, or are you just testifying on it today? Were you here in the interim?
I was not involved in it, Madam Chairman. I was,
Okay.
yeah, we
All
were
right.
not involved, and we just considered the bill at face value with those conservation considerations in mind without really taking into
Okay.
account the other
All right.
other aspects.
Okay, well, I just, this is a difficult bill to work with because of how small the title is. And so we have apiary standards and licensure in some other, we actually have the Wyoming Apiculture Act that deals with bees and beekeeping and all of those things that I think it might be more appropriate to approach it from that manner, hearing what, the big changes we've made with three little words. So anyway, I think we all support our bees and our beekeepers, but that might be something we have to look at. So,
Yeah, and Chairman Steinmetz, we would be open to being involved in the conversation moving forward.
all right, thank you.
We'd be open to that.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right, any other public comment in the room? Going once, twice, and gone. And we will now go to Zoom. We have 4 people on Zoom or 3 on this bill, and it looks like unless someone else has joined. Okay, and Michael Jordan, is he still there? He is not present. Okay, so why don't we start with Sarah Bieber, since we have her listed first on our sheet? Our thanks to Pierre because he does such a great job with our Zoom. We couldn't do it without him.
She's in your room, but she has not turned on her mic or cameras.
Sarah Bieber, are you able to hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Sarah Bieber. I live in Casper, Wyoming. My dad is actually a small hobby beekeeper, and he just had some questions about this that made me reach out and ask some other questions. So I actually did have a conversation with Michael Jordan, who was going to testify, and some other people involved with the Bee College here in Wyoming. One of the things that I was told is that in interim, this came out of Jackson. I'm not sure if that's where the interim committee met or not. And it was pushed as a way to reduce property taxes on expensive properties. And as mentioned, there's no structure for if that would work that way or not, or, any guardrails on, is it the huge mansions that are being built on these lots of land that they're just trying to reduce the property taxes on, or is this actually something that would be good for apiaries and beekeepers? So I think I had more questions than I actually had comment.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I don't know that we are able to answer your questions. I would ask you, would you be for or against the bill, or are you undecided?
At this time, I would encourage you to vote against it. There's too many unknowns, and we don't want to cause we don't want to hurt this very small population of beekeepers that we have in Wyoming. They do a lot, and it's hard work to do what they do already, and I would hate this to impact them negatively. And there's just not enough structure of all of the other little pieces, obviously, as you already heard. So I would not be in favor of this right now.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah, for taking the time to testify tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you for keeping bees. We know how important they are.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you. All right, next would be Paul Anderson, if he's available online.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, welcome to the Ag Committee.
Thank you.
Please
Chairman,
state your name and the organization you're with and proceed on.
I'm Paul Anderson. I'm a hobbyist beekeeper and also operate a small business, Prairie Wind Bee Supply. Um, my position on the bill is currently opposed to it, as I understand it. One of the things about beekeeping that's maybe overlooked by a lot of people that want to jump into the hobby or into the industry is how fragile the populations are and how important care and parasite control and proper feeding and proper genetics all play into the health of bees in general. And although I'm a small operator as far as the number of bees that I keep, there are some large operations that operate in the state, and having unhealthy colonies on property for the sake of possibly a property tax break really puts at risk those industries, those people who rely on it for their livelihood. I think that like the bill itself, where it's only 3 words and we don't really see all the impact. And I appreciate the testimony of from the Department of Revenue and the explanation of that I don't even think that many of those people maybe who were initiating the bill really understand all the things that come into play as far as what would be required for a piece of property to be considered an agricultural property. So I guess I just wanted to clarify the situation from a beekeeper standpoint, and also I'm really connected to try to understand better what they were trying to accomplish. I still don't know, because we don't have the originator of the bill and their actual intent behind it. But anyway, I guess that's all my comment at this point.
Well, thank you, Paul. We appreciate your perspective, and we too are searching for the originator, but we are truly glad you joined us tonight. So thank you, and thank you for keeping bees.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else who's showed up on Zoom? No, Michael Jordan? Okay. All right. With that being said, we will close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on the bill?
Move the bill.
Senator French moves the bill. Is there a second? The bill dies for a lack of a second and is deemed tabled indefinitely. All right, that concludes those 2 bills, and Senator Hicks is not here to present Senate File 68. So we will hold that bill over until next Tuesday. If we could, hopefully our good state engineer is listening and hears that we will be holding that bill over until next Tuesday, January 17th, upon adjournment. I would also like to announce the other bills we'll be covering then. So we'll move Senate File 68, prescriptive easement for water conveyances, to next Tuesday, the 17th. We will also hear Senate File 96, Water Omnibus Bill Planning and Administration. Senate File 82, Water Eligible Water and Sewer Projects Funding. And if time permits, Senate File 27, Tribal Relations, Weed and Pest Mitigation, Tribal Inclusion, and that's from Tribal Relations. Shouldn't have read that part. And Senate File 28, Livestock Infectious Disease Control, Tribal Inclusion. So we have a good workload for next week. Thank you all for joining us on the Ag Committee. We're adjourned.